hand over to Freya now to take us through how we can stay engaged after the elections.
Yeah, so thank you so much for answering everyone's questions and for your great presentation. So kind of building on what's already been covered by the speakers and in some of your questions, we're going to talk a bit now about some of the things that you can do to stay engaged in these local decision-making processes beyond the elections. So it's really important that your interest in your local council and climate change doesn't end after these elections. So you can contact your new councillors once they've been elected by going onto your council's website and finding their email addresses or phone numbers. You can also type your postcode into the link in the chat to find out who your councillors are. You can also find out on your council website what specific interests your councillors have. So it tells you what committees they sit on, and yeah, their kind of specific areas of expertise, which can be really helpful for finding out whether they're interested in climate or environment. And councillors will also often hold surgeries where you can show up and ask them questions online or in person as well. So there are a lot of things that you can ask your councillors to do which will help make their climate policies a reality. So you could meet up with your council's climate change committee or working group to ask what their plans are for climate action in your local area and to ask them to go further or go faster. A lot of councils have a decarbonisation plan in place, so you can use that as a basis for your questions if your council has one. And many councils in Scotland have joined the Scottish Government in officially declaring a climate emergency. So if your council hasn't done so, this can be a really good first step towards ensuring that they recognise the gravity of the situation. So you can find out whether your council's declared a climate emergency at the link in the chat, which kind of brings together all the councils in the UK. So yeah, as we've kind of mentioned earlier, and as Rona was mentioning earlier in her presentation as well, education is extremely important to climate action. You want your representatives to have a solid understanding of the scale and the urgency of the climate emergency, as well as how it impacts people in your local area. It's also beneficial for councillors to understand what kind of climate solutions are viable in your local authority area. So Keep Scotland Beautiful runs bespoke carbon literacy training specifically for local authorities, which covers all of that and more. And the Carbon Literacy Project also offers these free toolkits for local authorities to undertake their own climate emergency training or carbon literacy training. So you can find out more about that at the links in the chat. So that's something that you could ask your councillors if they've already done, or you could suggest that they make it compulsory for all councillors to learn these kind of facts about the climate emergency and what they can do about it. So another key action that councillors can take to reduce their climate impact is to divest their pension funds from industries that are causing the climate crisis, for example, the oil and gas industry. So this might not be something that immediately springs to mind when you think about climate action, but it can have a really big impact. So we're really lucky to be joined today by Lewis from the Divest Strathclyde campaign group, who's going to tell us a bit more about how harmful local authority pension funds can be and how we can all engage with our councillors about divestment. So Lewis works as a charity employee and a musician, and in his spare time he volunteers for campaign groups like Divest Strathclyde and Divest Parliament, which focuses on breaking financial ties and support for the fossil fuel industry. So yeah, welcome Lewis, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll just stop my screen sharing so you can share your slides.
Great, thanks so much, Ray. Thanks so much for having us along to speak today. Should also say that this whole presentation was actually prepared by Vix, who is another member of the group who put all these slides together beautifully and then lost her voice completely, so isn't actually able to do the presentation itself. So I'm stepping in for her. Just shout out to Vix for being fantastic. So yeah, I'm volunteer with the group Divest Strathclyde. We are a group of concerned citizens and all kind of volunteers with the group living in Glasgow and the Strathclyde area. You've heard already from people who've spoken earlier in the session about the severity of the climate crisis, and there's been lots of good suggestions already about useful actions that we can all take. But I'm here to talk specifically about money and the roles that finance can play in those kind of the web of connections of money, and the importance of considering that when thinking about how to try and act on climate change. So just to explain the name of our group, which sometimes causes confusion, we're called Divest Glasgow. Divest simply means the opposite of invest. So it's about taking money out of harmful industries such as the tobacco industry or the fossil fuel industry. It's an approach that was actually pioneered in opposition to apartheid in South Africa. There was a big movement to divest from companies that were involved in operating in South Africa. It's very successful in leading to the downfall of apartheid. So that's a big part of where our inspiration comes from. So we are a group who have been lobbying our local council for the last 4 years to divest the Strathclyde Pension Fund from fossil fuels. So the Strathclyde Pension Fund is the largest local authority pension fund in Scotland and one of the largest in the whole of the UK. Research that we carried out with Friends of the Earth Scotland found that there's an estimated £836 million invested in fossil fuel companies through that fund, which is a slightly terrifyingly large amount. The fund is basically a huge pot of money which is used to cover the pensions for employees working in the whole Strathclyde area. So that includes Glasgow, but that also includes lots of the councils around it. So Renfrewshire, Lanarkshire, Ayrshire, Inverclyde, Argyll, this whole huge area. So it's a really important pot of money, and it's looked after by a committee of Glasgow Council. So I suppose this is where the influence over councillors really comes in, that as citizens living in Scotland, we have this really direct line of connection where we can try and influence these huge amounts of money which are going into the fossil fuel industry and try and move them into ethical and sustainable alternatives, because that pension fund is managed by a committee of councillors who are meant to be representing us and looking after our best interests. So we've done a lot of work trying to reach and influence those councillors in different ways. You can see here a few pictures of a few protests that we've held. This is kind of a part of what we do. So trying to make a lot of noise, get attention, get in the local press quite successfully. That's a big part of it, but there's lots of other aspects too. We spend quite a lot of time just trying to meet with and talk to councillors. I think that's something that Freya touched on already about that process of working out who your councillors are, doing a bit of research. We've certainly spent quite a lot of time seeing who sits on which committee, which councillors are actively involved in work on climate change, trying to find issues that we're aligned on, ways we can work together. You can actually see two of the councillors in that picture on the top right, who both sit on the committee that looks after the pension fund, both of whom we've managed to have some very productive conversations with. So that's been one really useful tool. We also put together an open letter that was signed by lots of users of the pension fund. We've used a lot of social media, including things like meme storms or tagging councillors in posts. That's quite an effective way to reach people directly. Lots of email campaigns, as well as things like protests and rallies. And we've spoken at events run by things like the Youth Strikers, who've been very supportive of us as a campaign, which has been really fantastic. It's also worth noting that divestment as a tactic has already been pretty successful. So in 2016, it was Waltham Forest became the first UK local authority to commit to divesting. More than half of all UK universities have now committed to divesting their endowments from fossil fuels. The UK's largest pension fund is also committed to divestment, and globally more than 1,500 different institutions have made divestment commitments of varying kinds, including some really massive ones like the New York State Pension Fund, as well as Ireland, the whole of Ireland. So there have been some really big success stories, and we as a group have made big progress as well. I think it's worth saying, although we're not all the way there yet. I suppose I'm here to kind of encourage you to consider getting involved with divestment campaigns is, I think, a really rewarding and effective way to take climate action in Scotland. I've certainly found it to be very kind of fulfilling kind of route to trying to make a difference. We are Divest Strathclyde, that's our group, but we're kind of operating in the sort of Glasgow region, but there are a bunch of other campaigns. You can see this map here, which is taken from the Divest UK website, which shows where they're all located. Probably the big ones is Scotland to Us, Divest Lothian, who are based around Edinburgh, Falkirk. There's also a group of people trying to start a Highlands campaign for anyone who's interested in being involved in that. And then there are some UK-wide ones like Divest Parliament, which is trying to get the MP pension fund to divest from fossil fuels. There's also the universities campaign, which is run by People and Planet and has been extremely successful. You can also sign a petition put together by an organisation called Make My Money Matter, who are trying to get pension providers to, well, the way they put it is to put People and Planet on a par with profits. And they actually did some research that found that greening your pension can be 21 times more effective at reducing your carbon footprint than giving up flying, going veggie, and switching energy provider combined. So I think that's a really quite astonishing stat that shows the extent that kind of thinking about this kind of financial side, which often seems quite abstract and distant, can make a really huge difference and is really worth considering. So I think coming to the end of our time, so I'll leave it off there and just leave space for questions. If you do want to learn more about what we do as a group or even get involved, always looking for new members, new people to work with, do feel free to get in touch. You can check out our website or find us on social media, and those are the details there. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for that. Really great to hear about the campaign and how successful it's been, and yeah, it's definitely a really direct way that people can get involved in influencing their councillors and making a really big impact. So yeah, we're going to put another link in the chat as well, where you can find out where your local council's pensions are invested, as Lewis was saying, they're in various ones across Scotland. So yeah, the UK Divest website also has some really good tips on how to persuade your council to divest from fossil fuels as well. So we're going to move on now to talk about the Scottish Youth Climate Declaration, which is another tool that you can use to engage with your local councillors and council candidates about the climate emergency. So Naomi's going to talk to us a bit about that. I'll just share my screen again to show you that.
Thanks, Freya. Yeah, so as part of the Scottish Youth Climate programme, which we ran in partnership with Young Scot and Keep Scotland Beautiful, on the 30th of October last year, we brought together around 70 young people from across Scotland. They all came together online to create a Scottish Youth Climate Declaration, which sets out the most pressing issues for children and young people and their demands to the Scottish Government and international decision makers. So at that summit, they heard from a range of experts to understand key issues, and the topics covered included themes such as children's rights, education and jobs, energy and renewables, biodiversity. The list is on the right-hand side there as well. And you can watch the declaration video and read all of the demands in the link in the chat box, which should be shared just now. So I think we've covered quite a lot of the kind of ways that you can stay engaged. I think the speakers have also touched on a lot of these already, but I'll just quickly run through them all. So to support young people like yourselves in gaining the attention of policymakers and businesses, schools, anyone in sort of with a power to kind of influence decision making, we created the Scottish Youth Climate Declaration Endorsement Pack, which is a toolkit for young people to share their vision of a greener and fairer world. And there are a range of ways that you can endorse the declaration, which are transferable to any campaign that you might be trying to raise awareness of. So yeah, as I said, lots of these ideas cross over with a lot of what our speakers have shared today. So these are just some ways you might want to engage decision makers in issues important to you. Using the power of social media is massive. So for the declaration endorsement, we asked young people to post a photo of themselves with the declaration themes, and also encouraged MSPs and MPs and local councillors to do the same, or for young people to take a photo alongside them. And we shared some suggested social media posts to get the message out there, and used a hashtag as well to kind of gain traction. So you can see an example of this in the photo on the right, which was shared on Twitter by the North Lanarkshire Local Climate Ambassador Group. Vlogging as well can make a huge impact. So they're a great way to get people interested and engaged. And even a 1-minute video can get messages across really effectively. And you're also learning lots of new skills in the process. And it's important to think about where you might want to film your vlog. So it might be outside a council building, it might be outside Parliament, or an area or green space that you're campaigning to protect. Having conversations in your local community, I think that's a key theme that's come out of today's conversations and in the Q&A as well. Just having a conversation with someone can go a long way. It might be worth trying to identify someone in your community who might have interesting views on issues that you're campaigning for. So a local climate activist, your local councillor, you could set up an interview with them, and maybe you could film that and put that on social media, or you could just bring those members of your community along to your next youth group meeting and host some discussions with them. You can also use YouthLink Scotland as a platform for promoting a topic you're passionate about and raising more awareness by writing a blog for us. So you can reach out to myself or Freya if you do want to write a blog, or if you have any opportunities that you'd like to post out to our network of young people and youth workers, we'd be happy to do that as well. And writing letters as well. So there's also a letter template within the pack just to help you reach out to your local councillor, your MP or MSP. And hopefully you can implement some of those ideas and plans into your own communities after today's webinar.
Seems to be our slides done. But that just, leaves us to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming along tonight, and especially our amazing guest speakers for sharing their experiences and their perspectives on this super important issue. If there's one thing that we'd like you to take away from this session, it is that the voices of young people are so powerful, and they're absolutely vital to these conversations about climate action on a local and national level. So with these council elections, we've all got a real opportunity to have our voices heard and to use our voices. So make sure you register to vote if you haven't done so already, and that you also continue to engage with these decision-making processes once the elections are over as well. So we want you to leave this session with a clear idea of what your first steps are going to be to engage with your local councillors. And we talked a lot about a lot of different options for engagement, and we're aware of giving you a lot of information, which can be a bit overwhelming. And it also shouldn't be up to one person or one group to do everything. So when you're thinking about what you can do to engage with your specific local authority, make sure that you look at your capacity and your strengths and skills, and remember that everyone has these different strengths and skills that are all really vital and really useful to the climate movement. So we'll put a link in the chat to a document that has all the different links and resources that we've shared today, so that you can access them again later, and we'll also send it out by email after the session. But yeah, just thank you so much for joining, and hope you all have a great long weekend, and remember to register to vote over the long weekend if you haven't done it already. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone.